I speak to you in the name of the one holy and living God.
Amen.
Well, on Monday morning, I sat down to read the lections for today, settled myself on the mountaintop with Peter, James, and John, witnessing Jesus' glorious transfiguration. And it occurred to me, well, maybe I will preach on one of the most delightful moments in my priestly ministry, witnessing the transfigured face of a groom as he watches his bride walking up the aisle toward him. Love radiating up his spine, stretching him and just spreading out through his face. In that holy moment, I behold his glory. Oh, but then the week continued. Yeah. And a full-on war erupted in Ukraine. The balance of global powers is hanging by a thread, and today we are chilled to the bone and wonder, how can an image of a transfigured groom, or even a mountaintop moment with Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, speak to us? Is it not remote? Perhaps even irrelevant? But is it? Is it not our faith that hidden in the cleft of every brutal breach and war-torn wound is the presence of that which is never ravished or ruined? And is it not our hope that Jesus' promise, I am with you always, even to the end of the world, is trustworthy and true? And do we not choose to plant our feet in the sure and certain love that St. Paul promises to the Romans as they suffer in their own time? For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God. Dear people of God, do we not choose to live by faith, with hope, in love, regardless of the circumstance? Now, some of you may recall, several years ago, we spent the entire year finding God in all things. Did anybody here remember that? We had little business cards, and on them it said, I found God. And people would write down the stories and share the stories of how they found God that week. And I'd preach from it from time to time. And again, we were surprised that not only did we find God in the likely places, sunrises and babies and weddings and unexpected boons and wonderful mercies, but we also found God in the dark days when someone showed up and extended a hand, a help, a mercy, a meal, their presence. We also found God in the transparent eyes of a dying elder, finding God in all things. Well, only hours after reading the dark and dire news of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on Thursday morning, I met with a woman whom I will call Karen. 80-year-old Karen was trembling. Her hands were shaking. She was wrapped in cold from the inside out, utterly devastated, afraid, anxious, fearful. Karen had spent the previous 4 hours trying to recover from a computer hack that invaded her email, her contact list, and sent messages to all of her family, friends, and neighbors and colleagues requesting their assistance. Karen had never heard of such a thing, could not believe what happened, had no idea how to proceed. And so we breathed together. And after spending a fair amount of time breathing deeply to try to restore some modicum of peace, a peace that is more than the absence of the disruptive incursion into her email, peace that is more than the quelling of emotions that we have in response to alien invasion, peace that is truly beyond our comprehension, peace that prevails against evil. Karen kept breathing. She kept breathing into her wound, into her anger, into her distress, and into her fear. Until finally, tears brought these words from Karen's heart to her lips. And she said to me, all these people love me. I had no idea. They received this message saying I needed assistance, and they're calling and they're showing up and they're bringing gift cards. I had no idea all these people love me. Karen found love in the depth of a wound inflicted by malevolent hackers. This, my friends, is finding God in all things. This is redemption. This is what we're invited to do with our world, in our hearts. An evil invasion by Russia or a malicious hacker's attack cannot and will not prevail against God. We know this. This is our faith. This is our hope. We are people who live in love, original, unmitigated, abiding love. And as people who choose to live by faith with hope in love, we can and we will experience all of life, the good, the bad, the abhorrent. We'll experience it all as sacrament, as holy, with God present. But to do so, we must stay awake. We must stay awake. So here's the thing. God is always and everywhere alive in our world and in our lives, but we must be awake to experience it. We dare not allow ourselves to be weighed down by the news of war and threats of global disaster. To experience life as sacrament, we cannot be distracted by gruesome images repeated over and over and over again, and anger-mongering words that intended to trip us into fear and seduce us into sleep and unconsciousness. Years ago, while making the Ignatian spiritual exercises, I found and saved this quote. And I don't know if it was St. Ignatius who said it or someone who was speaking years later on his behalf. But this wisdom has stayed with me, and I want to share it with you. By approaching all situations of life with the purest of intentions, we truly allow ourselves to seek and find God in all things with the purest of intentions. Dear people of God, I believe we are standing on a razor's edge of choice. Do we choose to capitulate to evil and live in fear? Or do we choose to live by faith with hope in love? And this isn't a once and forever choice. We make this choice every breath. Every breath. So let me suggest that if we choose the latter, that we must do whatever we do deliberately, mindfully, with our full attention, with the purest of intentions. We must be awake. Rather than muddle through each day, slipping from one routine into the next habit, into the next unconscious reaction, let us put our heads in our hearts and hold the purest of intentions. That intention being to find God in all things. All things. We must be awake. See, when we live our lives with the intention to find God in all things, like Peter, James, and John, we experience what theologians call a theophany. A theophany is an unmistakable personal encounter with divine presence. And we've all had them, and I know that because this weekend we had a Bishops' Committee retreat. And everybody shared stories about their theophanies. We didn't call it that. But that's what happened. You see, a theophany is nothing less and it's nothing more than the manifestation of glory in the face of a groom watching his bride walking up the aisle toward him, or the tears of a woman who had no idea how much she is loved. Amen.